conjugate regular French verbs in the present tense. So, there are 3 types of French verbs, each of which are designated by the ending in their infinitive form, and the infinitive form is to blank, blank being whatever the verb is. And so the 3 types of verbs are ER verbs, RE verbs, and IR verbs, and each have a different regular conjugation pattern. And so when you conjugate a verb, you drop these endings and add a specific ending depending on the pronoun that you're using before the verb or whatever noun you're using. And there are also some irregular verbs that do not follow these patterns. So you have to look out for those. Those have their own specific patterns that sometimes don't resemble these regular patterns at all. And there are some verbs that mostly follow this pattern, but with a few exceptions in certain forms. So, for example, verbs ending in GER, such as manger, which means to eat, and in EONS in the new form rather than ONS. And we'll get into that new form and the ONS later. And it's important to note that these exceptions are not covered in the video. So these apply only to completely regular verbs with no conjugation exceptions or irregular conjugations. So starting with ER verbs, drop that ER ending and add the following changes. So je, you add the E at the end. Tu, you add ES. Il, elle, on, qui, you add E. Nous, you add ONS. Vous, you add EZ. And il, elle, you add ENT. So I'm going to be using jouer to sort of give an example of how each of these endings would be pronounced. So conjugating jouer, starting with je joue, tu joues, il, elle, on, qui joue. So the first thing to notice is that when you pronounce these endings, they're actually silent in these first 3 forms. So you don't say jouer, you say joue. You don't say joues, you say joue. Moving on to the new form, we have jouons, where it is actually pronounced. However, you don't say jouons, the S stays silent, but you do say jouons. Next is jouer. Again, you don't say jouez, you say jouer, the Z is silent. And finally, joue. Il, elle, joue. Now here, the ENT is completely silent, and the last letter pronounced is the last letter before the ENT. So, joue. A few other regular ER verbs are aimer, to like, and chanter, to sing. And the only irregular ER verb that just completely does not follow this pattern is aller, to go. It looks completely different from this pattern, so don't even try to apply this pattern to conjugating aller. And there are some other verbs, such as GER verbs, like manger, that follow this pattern for the most part, but do have a few exceptions in particular forms. Moving on, we have the RE verbs. Starting off, you drop the RE ending and add these endings to conjugate. So in the je form, it's S. In the tu form, it's S. Il, elle, on, qui form, it's nothing. In the new form, we have ONS. In the vous form, we have EZ. And in the il, elle, we have ENT. So these last 3 plural forms are exactly the same as in ER verbs. So once again, I will be using an example RE verb to give you guys an idea of how these endings are pronounced. So we're going to take vendre, which means to sell, and we're going to conjugate the verb in the present tense. So starting with je vends, tu vendes, il, elle, on, qui vendent, nous vendons, vous vendez, ils, elles vendent. So once again, the S's are silent in the je and tu forms. There's nothing on the il, elle, on, qui form, so you would just pronounce as is. Again, in O and S, the S is silent, and in EZ, the Z is silent, so you don't say vendons, you say vendons. You don't say vendez, you say vendez. And finally, the ENT in the il, elle form is completely silent, so you just say vend. Another regular RE verb would be entendre, which means to hear. And with the RE verbs, there are quite a few irregular ones, such as boire, to drink, prendre, to take, and être, to be. And finally, we have the IR verbs. And so when you're conjugating regular IR verbs, you drop the IR and you add the following endings. Je, you add IS. Tu, you also add IS. Il, elle, on, qui, IT. Nu, ISS, ONS. So this is quite different from the other two types of verbs. In the vous form, we have ISSEZ, and in the il, elle form, we have ISSENT. So, to give you guys an idea of the pronunciation, once again, we're going to be using an example of a regular IR verb. So, finir, which means to finish, we'll be conjugating that. So, starting with je, we have je finis, tu finis, il, elle, on, qui finit, nous finissons, vous finissez, ils, elles finissent. So, important things to note, the S's and the T in the first three forms are silent. You just say fini. You would not say finis or finite, just fini. In the plural forms, we have this ISS ending, which is pretty unique among the IR verbs, and you would say finissons, not finissons. So the S, once again, is silent at the end. The Z is silent at the end for finissez, not finisses. And finally, the ENT is silent. However, the two S's are pronounced. And so whenever you have an IR verb in the il, elle form, plural, you would say is at the end. So another regular IR verb would be choisir, which means to choose. And a few irregular IR verbs would be avoir and venir. So, one important thing to note in recognizing if you have an irregular verb on your hands is if you look at the root word. So, for example, let's take the verb apprendre. So, notice that we do have that RE ending. So, clearly we have an RE verb on our hands. However, you can also see this root here of prendre. So, as you would guess, you would conjugate apprendre just like you would conjugate prendre, and since prendre is irregular, you would not conjugate it using these regular verb endings. The same thing applies to anything ending in venir. So, venir, revenir, devenir, those are all conjugated irregularly, and they're conjugated in the same pattern as venir. Okay, so now I'm going to give you guys some practice with conjugating these different regular verbs. So the first step is always to look at the last two letters and discern which type of regular verb we're dealing with here. And then you just have to remember the endings. And finally, it's always helpful to practice your pronunciation. So as you're conjugating this verb, try and also say them out loud to yourself. So I'll give you guys some time. Go ahead and pause and work through this yourself. And then I will work through it and show you guys the answer. Okay, so we have the verb danser, which means to dance. First thing to note here, we have an ER verb. So we'll be using the ER regular verb endings. So we have je danse, tu danses. Il, elle, on qui danse. Nous dansons. Vous dansez. And il, elle danse. Okay, next verb. Go ahead and pause and try to conjugate this verb, pronounce it to yourself, and then I will go ahead and go through the answer. So, first thing to notice, we have an RE verb. Attendre, to wait for, that's a regular RE verb, so it's conjugated like this. And since we have a vowel at the beginning of our verb, our je here is actually going to be J apostrophe when we're dealing with the verb. So it would look like this, j'attends, rather than je attends. Next, in the to form, we have attend, tu attends, il, elle, on qui attend, nous attendons, vous attendez, and finally, ils, elles attendent. And so, again, we have some odd pronunciation quirks you might have heard. Because our verb starts with a vowel, when we said the nous and vous form and the il, elle plural form, all of these end in S. And so when you're using these forms, then you have a little Z in the pronunciation between the nous, vous, or il, elle, and the verb. So you would not say nous attendons, you actually say nous attendons. And the only time when you would not have that Z sound in between is if there's a long pause between the nous and the attendons, or the vous and the attendez, etc. So moving on to our last practice verb, grandir, to grow. Alright, so first thing to notice, we have an IR verb. So we're going to use this pattern. Je grandis, tu grandis, il, elle, on qui grandit, nous grandissons, vous grandissez, and ils, elles grandissent. So that's about everything you need to know if you want to conjugate regular French verbs in the present tense. So always make sure you know which type of verb you're dealing with and whether or not you're actually working with a regular verb. And it's important to note that this is only in the present tense. Different tenses and forms have different conjugation patterns. Thanks for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe to Flight Notes.